Bueno, Pablo, el balón es tuyo. A mí sí que me gustaría dejar, como siempre, una primera reflexión, y es las inversiones de capital, sobre todo que viene de lugares del mundo diferentes al nuestro, ¿no? o de sociedades diferentes a las nuestras, tan potente en algunos clubes, hasta llegar a tener la gestión total de esos clubes. No puede poner en riesgo la identidad de esos propios clubes, no puede haber algo de riesgo. Aquí tenemos a un representante de City Football Group, al propio Javier, quizás alguno pueda ahondar en esa reflexión. Toda tuya.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. We'll try to do it half in Spanish, half in English. You will excuse my Spanish is not as good, and my English is even worse. Well, we have quite an outstanding floor here in front of you. They've been introduced to you. Maybe just a couple of words on Don Dransfield, first of all. I mean, you've been working with one of the largest, I would say, proprietorships of clubs in the world. Before that, you were with BCG, Boston Consulting Group.
That's right.
You've been a project leader in all the media, so a large experience as a consultant and joined proprietorship. I will ask you some questions later in your reflection in your role as representing large investors. On his left, Gregory Carey, probably one of the most experienced bankers in the world in financing and infrastructure. We will talk a little bit about what you're doing today with Goldman Sachs, but maybe also your past experience with Citigroup and what you achieved during all these years, the amounts of money with our astronomical that you're putting through for infrastructures, for stadiums. So we'll talk about it later. Thank you very much, Jason, for having joined. There was a last-minute change. As I said, somebody was blocked with the Mexican wall and couldn't join us today. So Jason Traub came in really as a thank you very much. I mean, large experience with Investec in club financing. Now one of the co-founders of 23rd Capital or 23rd Investment. We will get into what you can do for investors willing to buy clubs or clubs looking maybe for investors. Y terminaremos con lo mejor, es lo que el señor Javier Gómez, lo que un representante de una institución como la Liga puede hacer en ayudar a la gente, a los inversores interesados a entrar en España, a entrar en clubes. Pero también podemos ver con tu experiencia con el Valencia, que fue una experiencia de 15 años, a la mayoría, el maximum seniority del Valencia Football Club. Pero ya esta mañana, antes de entrar, me encantó la disponibilidad de Javier en decirme, bueno, Pablo, tú también te estás invirtiendo en España, estamos acá para vos, estamos acá para ayudarte, para ayudar a inversores. Y me gustó mucho como actitud, y es la actitud de transparencia y de ayuda que inversores en general buscan y que no siempre encuentran con las instituciones. I'll try to switch back to English. It's going to be fun because I'm mixing everything in my brain, languages and everything. By the way, all of the gentlemen here, I mean, the first two are not football players, they're ex-rugby players. So this is also something quite fun.
So don't mess around with us.
Yeah, don't mess around. Don, back to you. I mean, you represent the City Football Club, enormous proprietorship. I sent you a question which was, I mean, what is the strategy behind? What is the investment? I know you cannot say it all, but you already own 6 clubs, a little bit everywhere in the world.
That's right, Pablo. And first up, I should say that I'm very excited to be speaking here at WFS on behalf of City Football Group. For those of you who aren't familiar with City Football Group, we have 6 football clubs, 6 elite level teams today operating in world football. The first of those teams was an acquisition that we made back in 2008, which is Manchester City Football Club. I'm sure that most of you are very familiar with them. They play in the Premier League in the UK. We also have an elite level female team that plays on behalf of Manchester City, that play in the WSL League in the UK. Our next acquisition was an acquisition in New York in Major League Soccer, a team that is called New York City Football Club. The year after that, we bought a team in Melbourne called Melbourne City. Again, this is a club which has got both an elite men and an elite women's team. We have a minority stake in Japan in a team called the Yokohama Marinos. And most recently, in this year, we made 2 further acquisitions, a team called Girona, which plays here in Spain, and a team that plays in the Segunda division in Uruguay called Torque. So we have six clubs. In addition to those 6 clubs, we also have a range of other businesses which operate within the general footballing ecosystem. The most recent example of that was a joint venture investment that we made with our partners, Goals PLC, where we have some recreational soccer pitches on the west coast of the US. And our strategy, to go to the question that you asked me, very much is to look at the underlying synergies and network benefits that result from being able to operate both across multiple geographies and across multiple elements of the value chain within each of those geographies. So in very practical terms, what that means from a footballing perspective is it means we're able to have more scouts in more places, watching more games on more players and collecting better data and information to allow us to be able to make better investment decisions on those players. There are also some more nuanced benefits to scale. So from a commercial perspective, we have more assets across more time zones, which means that we're able to better serve our partners. And I guess finally, but most importantly for our fans, it means that we have a greater volume and better quality of interaction with our fans because we're able to have multiple assets. And all of this really is a continuation of the original investment thesis, if you like, back in 2008 from our principal shareholder, Sheikh Mansour, and our chairman, Khaldoon Al-Mubarak, who look at football as the world's #1 sport and look at the sector as the opportunity to make an investment which over the medium to long term can generate growth in enterprise value for the shareholder, but also growth in social enterprise capital for the communities with which we come into contact. And I guess that the substantial revenue growth that we've seen post-acquisition, in the almost 10 years now post-acquisition, substantiates or validates that original investment thesis.
There's, for me, the first question that I will ask you, but maybe we can also ask later also, is buying several teams 1 + 1 = 2 or a 1 + 1 = 3, 4, 5? I mean, the effective synergies, I imagine, both in merchandising, fans, and big data must be exponential.
That's the way that we see it as well. So we see every additional acquisition of adding more to the group than just the individual sum of the parts of each incremental acquisition. Absolutely.
Can we know some figures? What's a global investment value today?
Sure. It's a good question.
It's not on the list, I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
It's a little tricky.
Don't worry.
I'll give him an offer.
It definitely won't be enough. I know bank as well. No, so the original investment back in 2008-09 in Manchester City Football Club, and this is public, so this was around £200 million. About 24 months ago, we divested some of our equity to CMC at group level. It's a Chinese media conglomerate. And that valued our business at more than 10x the original investment. So absolutely, from both with regards to the impact it can have in terms of positive benefits for our fans, but also with regards to the growth in enterprise value for our shareholder, the incremental benefit of adding each additional entity, be it a club or another business, is very much 1 + 1 = 3.
And you don't need financing from banks, or do you? Because if I now look at your neighbor on the left, that's what he does. So he finances not only club, but essentially, I think, and maybe we pass on to the next question to Gregory Carey, stadium financing, infrastructure financing, maybe club financing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Goldman Sachs is doing at the moment?
Sure, and we do, for public information, we actually are working with New York City Football Club as soon as we can find a proper location for a stadium, because they currently play in Yankee Stadium, which is a stadium that actually I financed back in 2006.
It's a joint operation that you're doing with the group, then?
No, we represent the New York City Football Club.
Okay, perfect.
So we've been, it's very interesting, as you look at what Goldman Sachs, and I've been in the business for 35 years, the last 14 at Goldman Sachs. I started my career actually representing municipalities trying to fund, and in the old days in the United States, we used to pay for stadiums all out of public money, and a lot of that public money has dried up in a lot of the places. And I transformed about 20 years ago, actually working with Bob Kraft, doing Gillette Stadium for the NFL. And again, in the major cities felt they didn't need to contribute to financing public infrastructure. So whether it be in Los Angeles, New York, Boston, things like that. So we learned what the X's and O's of the business were, and learned how to actually finance revenue streams on the private side. The biggest difficulty we've always faced is what is going on at the team level, and the difference in Europe, where there are no salary caps, what people spend, versus in the US, where there are the salary caps. We've been able to bifurcate the revenue streams and to make where a club could lose money, but the stadium financing could be investment grade, and to be able to do long-dated type of financing, first bank financing, but also long-dated financing. So in my career, I've actually worked on 40 stadium and arenas, and call this the European invasion, because I've been hanging out in Europe once a month doing work in Spain, Italy, France, Germany, the UK, and now in the Netherlands.
But it works how? You emit, for example, a bond, you create some paper for a particular financing, or how do you actually guarantee yourself also, and guarantee to the investors?
Sure, there's both, and Europe is actually probably, the capital markets in Europe are probably 20 years behind the capital markets in the United States. Mostly because the regional banks have always tried to keep the bankers, the investment bankers out of it. They want to control the business, they'll invest locally. Hence why some of the Spanish banks here have had issues during the financial crisis of the investments, the illiquid investments that they made in infrastructure. If you look at infrastructure, it pays back over 30 years, not over 5 years or 10 years. So we basically set up unique structures or create bankruptcy remote entities. So understanding the revenue streams. For example, in Italy, we created a media co. So we took the TV rights, the shirt, and the kit and put it in a special purpose entity and put the intellectual property in that financing vehicle. So if the club overspent or went bankrupt, these revenue streams wouldn't get rolled into it. So we create a laddering from a rating perspective. And this can be done with revenue streams, but also where our expertise is on the stadiums, and really taking stadiums and allowing, some of these stadiums in the United States that I've replaced, I actually financed early in my career the old one. So we're replacing stadiums in 30 years. Some of the stadiums I'm looking at in Europe were financed or built originally in the 1880s. And no matter how much renovation you put, the bones are still 125 years old. And I have a townhouse in New York that's an 1880 townhouse, and every time you open the door, you hear this big sucking sound because it's the money you have to pour into an older building to keep it live. But it's also very interesting, you take a look at the clubs in Europe versus the clubs in the United States, and this is the stadium evolution or revolution that is coming to Europe. 50% of in 2006, when we financed the Yankees' new stadium, 50% of their revenues were coming from tickets and suites. If you look at some of the clubs in Europe, less than 10% of their revenues comes from the tickets and the suites. Partly because they're inadequate, dilapidated facilities, partly because of the inability to increase prices because of the national ownership people think they have in the clubs. You look what happened in Liverpool. Liverpool did a renovation, tried to raise the price on 2,500 seats, and there was a fan revolt. So you have to almost do a transformation that you're offering different product and attracting that additional revenue, because that additional revenue needs to go to the bottom line. That bottom line will help support more player spend, will allow them to compete in the Champions League market. And you look at what's happening with Spurs right now, a brand new stadium, 600–700 million pounds, but it's the amount of excess money that'll actually spin off will allow them to compete on a daily basis with Man City and Man U.
Where does Goldman Sachs enter as let's say, as a value for investment of either refurbishing or creating a stadium? Is it like a 20,000 seaters and above, or where's the level you enter?
We do projects as little as 50 million euros. But again, what we do for a lot of these clubs is we become an extension of staff. We understand the cash flows of the business better than anyone because we've lent it, we live with them, we look at the feasibility. What should they be building? Should they be building suites? Should they be building clubs? How many seats? What is the market demand? And then we basically sit with the owners and we become their advisor, and then we lend money. So lending the money is the last thing we do, but understanding what is that project, how to get that project up and running, what is the government discussions, how do we get through environmental process, how to negotiate a construction contract. That is where we start. We finish by lending the money. But projects anywhere from 50 million to €1.5 billion euros or dollars.
I'll jump, Jason, we'll just break the order a little bit, but also, as we have Javier was here, maybe can you tell us a little bit what and if you're doing something with the Spanish clubs, with stadiums here, because I read an article some time back which was very interesting. Le pedía un poco de saber cómo era la interacción, si hay algo que se está haciendo acá en España también con la Liga por parte de financiación y de estadios.
Bueno, nosotros hemos tenido una etapa previa dentro de nuestra estrategia de saneamiento de los clubes. Lo primero que nos planteamos es que tenían que estar equilibrados y tomamos una medida importante como era, por todos conocidos, la norma de control económico que implantamos en la Liga, que no está implantada o va más allá del fair play financiero de UEFA. Eso fue la primera etapa y ha dado como resultado que los clubes españoles pues ya están en primera división completamente saneados y en segunda división culminarán entre esta temporada y la siguiente. Esa primera fase lleva a que los clubes empiecen a plantearse pues este tipo de inversiones, ¿no? Ahora estoy saneado, ahora necesito invertir dinero en mis infraestructuras, dígase estadios o dígase ciudades deportivas. Y en eso están los clubes en España. No olvidemos que ya hay estadios importantes recientemente terminados. Está el Atlético de Madrid, está también el Athletic Club de Bilbao, está el Español. Bueno, se habla también de los dos grandes están haciendo planteamientos de tipo de inversiones, y el Real Betis Balompié. En fin, estamos también en ese inicio de también los clubes de segunda división, aunque sean menores cantidades, para poder incrementar el retorno de sus inversiones, pues están planteando ya este tipo de acercamientos a como decís, a invertir, ¿no?
Is it translating okay?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. It's interesting. So they're really coming and pushing the clubs, not only the big first leagues, but also the second, and probably maybe also further down, also to Segunda B and others, because I see that now in Spain. I'm living a pure example. When the Ayuntamiento is calling in for investors because they cannot even pay for the gardeners to keep up the pitch, so it's becoming quite dramatic. I see the same thing in Italy, where apart from the first leagues, but the second and the Lega Pro, in small cities, they're desperate. I mean, you have the stadiums who become dangerous. I wouldn't send my family there to watch a match.
And it's very interesting, you think about that. Let's use Italy, for example. You have the top 5 or 6 clubs, but the competition of Serie A, it's very, very important that you have competitive games, otherwise people won't care about Inter playing Crotone on TV. And it's to have a league play, otherwise that you'll start to see a disintegration. So having the leagues, the underpinning of clubs coming up and down, having a financial base, having a strong base. You look at like Bournemouth. Bournemouth plays in the Premiership now, yet their stadium's 12,000 people. Just very small. The question is, can they ultimately compete, or will they just be a recycler at the bottom?
Which you're talking about?
Bournemouth.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very small. But getting back to Italy or to Spain, obviously Valencia's, through the financial crisis, both Valencia and Atletico live with delays in getting their stadiums half built.
Italy has the same.
Italy is the same.
Spal is a 10,000 people stadium there in Serie A.
But again, you have to have that strength, because the league has to have strength. That's why in the US is more, they manage these leagues towards the mean, not towards the upper club. But again, it's competition, major cities, and so this is always a big discussion, especially like in Italy. The distribution of TV money is legislatively dictated in Italy. It's so much of a national right, but the issue is the lack of infrastructure investment is caused Serie A to lag. The Premiership in Serie A 20 years ago were probably on parity, and now you're the top, and you look at Money League, and like the top 15 clubs are in the Premiership, all because of media revenue. And again, you're seeing that investment, and that investment in infrastructure begets investment. You have a big snowball, more money comes in, they can pay the players, more players, you can track the best, you're going to get more people watching it, the excitement of it. So it's a virtuous circle that you have to invest in the infrastructure, because some of the stuff is 100 years old.
And I want to keep that virtuous circle after to round up our own discussions and where are we going to go. But first of all, Jason, your experience is more of what I understood on the financing of the teams.
Right.
First of all, can you maybe tell us a little bit about your professional career with Investec and what you're doing today?
Right. So
and how investors can approach you and get money or help from you?
Yes, indeed, across both the debt and the equity side. So 23 Capital is a specialist lending platform. We're a debt provider. My background was finance. Contrary to my current dress code, I had the suit at Investec Bank for 15 years. We set up the sports and entertainment team there, and kind of what we certainly at the time felt pioneered a lot of the senior financings into a lot of the European clubs. Again, very vanilla financings, and very quickly moving on to 23 Capital, having left Investec Bank, felt that actually, along with the proliferation of dedicated and specialist lenders in any sector, the sport and entertainment suffered perhaps more than other sectors in being able to access institutional markets, more traditional financings, and could really benefit from that specialist lender. So we set up 23 Capital. We're a principal balance sheet. We've done close to $1 billion in the last 2.5 years, $1 billion. We have an appetite to try and at least double that over the next 12 months. And again, we hold a lot of those risks centrally, and it's on our balance sheet. I guess just to...
Can you just explain what you mean by being principal?
So ultimately, we'll lend the money ourselves, and we will hold the risks ourselves on our balance sheet. So we're not selling that risk down into the markets. We can, and we have that ability. And for us, being that dedicated lender, positioning ourselves as the expert, both within the footballing community and wider sports and entertainment sectors, but equally within the institutional markets. We have to go out and raise our own balance sheet. I know Greg, fortunately has a significant balance sheet behind him, and we'll cross over in certain areas, and we won't be able to compete on others. But we go out and we raise our balance sheet. So if anything, I feel we've got a really good sense of some of the challenges that the stakeholders in football, if it's the associations, if it's the clubs, if it's the rights holders, at all levels, will have themselves in accessing institutional markets. We ourselves are building that and have built that balance sheet to deliver.
But you have the risk to remain with a club in your hands.
Correct.
Like the hot potato, if there's a problem, you have to
manage it.
And what will you do in that case? Because it can also be a strategy, for example, to lend and saying, well, let's hope it doesn't work out well.
So we're a senior lender. So we enjoy senior risk profiles. You know, we have our partners, and to Greg's point, I agree entirely, a lot of that is US-based, just given where they are and on the sophistication relative to here.
So the banks were assisting you and providing you?
Other institutions, from pension funds to insurance companies. You know, it's a fungible pool, akin to a bank who would need to go out and raise their fungible pool. But ultimately, to your point, you know, we have a risk mandate. Our risk mandate is, you know, senior financing, and so, you know, it wouldn't be a long business of ours if we were looking to try and create other risks and maneuver within those risk profiles. And to that point, you know, I've alluded to, we've done close to $1 billion. It's all been senior risk profile. You know, fortunately, the book has performed extremely well, and the appetite is high.
Where are your areas of coverage today?
So we have the European footprint, global footprint. You know, we're sport and entertainment, and pretty much captures sport, music, media. We don't do film finance, but within football, a very similar footprint to Greg. I think the key distinction between us is clearly Greg's expertise in the stadia financing as much as anything, and that background, and that speaks to a very definitive product. Our experience is probably a little different to Greg. You know, we think that market has a different challenge. You know, ultimately a football club or a rights holder or an association, the balance sheet of those entities outside of a stadium is, are intangible assets, cash flows and intangible assets. And if you just look at the institutional markets across any sector, that's difficult. That's difficult for your mainstream banking groups, your mainstream, you know, pension and insurance companies, given their own challenges and capital issues of late, not so late, of the last X years. They love liquid, tangible assets that they can mark to market and trade if required, and that's an inherent challenge for the sector, and hence why I think it speaks very well to experts in this space, and whether that's Greg at Goldman's or hopefully what we're able to reflect. You know, the markets hate uncertainty in any walk of life. The fact that one can sit in front of institutional funders and stakeholders themselves and be able to build certainty, whether it's from carving up certain rights and being able to demonstrate why there is value on those rights despite any issues with the going concern. You know, the stadium performance and how that's uncoupled or decoupled from the performance of the actual club financially, and what happens if there are issues on one side versus another. That's confidence that there's no magic to it. You know, to access the wider institutional markets, you need to be able to drive that confidence and value.
And it's very interesting what's happened. The US market in most of the major sports has become commoditized. We're in a world right now where we have global interest rates are all at zero, basically, and the equity markets are all at their heights. So people are all cramming down. So people know, you know, league oversight is very strong in the US. So NFL, Major League Baseball, you know, and NBA, all are getting pricing almost through what our cost of money is. Right. So we're over here to basically help that and that's been done in an education process over the last 30 years, why it's a commodity. The same markets over here have not been educated. The local banks, for example, we know that Barclays lost a lot of money on leads years ago. You know, we call it leads risk, you know, overspending and then relegation. Understanding those and giving comfort that this intangible is really a tangible, and how do you make it a tangible?
But what's interesting is you can sit an hour ago on this very stage, fan monetization, virtual reality, just cutting edge sophistication, you know, which is the exciting aspect to sport and football, and yet I think the experiences of many in football, outside of Manchester United, outside of the global franchises, Manchester City and the like, is that they can barely raise financing for a year and a half. They can barely go beyond, and what a traditional stakeholder or investor would get from a widget factory in Idaho is often my example. No, you know, they can rely on a 4 or 5 year asset-based, longer-term lending, and
But don't you think it's also, and do excuse me those who are here, but it's a little bit the ego factor in the European football in general, the lack of management, the lack
question.
of line of conduct that you can see elsewhere, for example in the States. Here, unfortunately, we still don't have that.
I think that's the exact, you know, when Greg talks about some of that sophistication to the product of stadia financing, ultimately, I think you're exactly right. I remembered Investec in 2004 or 3, whenever it was, before, you know, in trying to build the confidence within a banking group with the credit committees and the like, we said, okay, let's get 2 MBA students, let's give it to them as a thesis for the year to look at Leeds, to look at Leicester of old, to look at where these historic chicken bones have been within the institutional financing community and where the monies have been lost. And it was, exactly to your point, it wasn't magic. Poorly run businesses, you know, ego-driven, to the, whether that was to the most part or as a result of, overspend, expenses 2x versus income, just basic
and it leads me immediately to a question. How do you value a club? Because we saw the 3 or 4 different systems, but maybe how does a group like yours, Sheikh Mansour, value and tell you guys to how much I'm willing to pay for that club? What are your parameters? And maybe to see where you, on the other side, would...
We use a traditional methodology, so we obviously look at what the future free cash flows are going to be for the entity. And there are a great number of variables that would play into that. So we look at local avidity for football. We look at growth in the ability of...
You said avidity or ability? Avidity.
So it's 2 things. It's avidity
I love it.
and interest in football, and its ability to be able to spend money. So we would look at both of those things, both from a static perspective, but also with regards to growth on a forward-looking basis. The other great thing in many ways about football clubs is that the future cash flows are actually, to some extent, quite predictable. You know what the broadcast deal is going to be for a period of time. You know what your forward-looking sponsorship deals are for a period of time, and you know to some extent what your player cost base is going to look like, and that, you know, in most clubs is the majority of the cost base. So you kind of factor all those things together, and then you are patient and you look at a range of more qualitative type factors as well. And actually, one of the things that was discussed before, which is more important than you'd imagine when investing in teams, is local institutions, of which absolutely local leagues are one of those things. So for us, absolutely, it's really important that all of our partners, when investing in a local club, are structured in a really efficiently run professional structure. And so investing in leagues that are run in that way with the right kind of regulation and the right kind of interaction between the various stakeholders and partners is really significant.
But which would be an interesting quote now to ask Javier. Now he represents LaLiga. What are you guys going to do? Are you foreseeing some interesting operations? You said Girona. How did that work? Was there an interaction with LaLiga?
Yeah, you know, obviously we have a team now which is playing in La Liga here in Spain. I mean, in some ways we were super lucky, right? Because we bought a team that played in the league beneath La Liga, which then ended up being promoted. So there was a subsequent immediate positive impact to the valuation.
It's not luck also. If you don't play, you never win.
Of course.
It's also being able to have the financing, the right people to make the right decision at a certain moment.
But I would posit that you absolutely should not make an investment decision assuming that you're going to get promoted, because that is the quickest way to being unsuccessful as an investor in football. So, you know, I think that we looked at it within the context of what that business and what the shape of that business would look like within that league, and then obviously, you know, we were fortunate enough to be in a situation where the team was promoted. So for us, I think, as we think about what makes interesting investment type opportunities at City Football Group and our kind of forward-looking strategy, absolutely we will continue to consolidate across our existing base of 6 clubs, of which Girona is now one important element of that 6, and look to really continue to provide a really strong proposition, exciting football for our fans to spectate and to watch and to be part of. But we'll also continue to be patient at looking at other investment opportunities, both in other leagues and other clubs, but also other businesses within the broader footballing ecosystem to look to continue to grow moving forwards. And to some of the points which the other guys here on the panel have raised earlier today, we remain at City Football Group super excited about football, not just as a sport, but as a sector for investment. If we look at the markets for which interest in football and avidity of fans for football is highest, it's in the markets where actually macroeconomic growth is the fastest. Plus you have this heady positive tailwind of having a live quality must-watch product in this world of cord cutting and increased scarcity in this space. So all of these factors, when combined together, makes soccer and football a really interesting opportunity moving forwards. And the final thing that I would say here is that actually for us at City Football Group, we've always been a big supporter of women's football. We currently have 2 elite-level women's teams. One plays in Manchester, the other plays in Melbourne. And moving forwards, we'll absolutely look to continue to support that, both as a sport, which we think is fantastic, but also over the medium to long term as an area for investment.
¿Qué necesitarías? ¿Cuáles serían, hoy te doy un sueño como liga, cuando tienes bancos como Goldman, cuando tienes financing arrangers como el de Jason, ¿cuál sería tu sueño como liga para de parte, decíamos, de financiación, Javier?
Bueno, antes de entrar en la parte del sueño de la financiación, el sueño que tenemos los que estamos trabajando en Liga es más bien una determinación, ¿no? Tenemos la determinación de ser los mejores, ¿no? Esa es la primera determinación que tenemos. Y en cuanto al sueño que me planteas respecto de los inversores que pueden llegar, o financiadores que pueden llegar a la Liga y que realmente están llegando, ¿no? Tenemos una avalancha de demanda de potenciales compradores de clubes. Eso es así, pero en el día a día hemos tenido que crear estructura para filtrar esas demandas, ¿no? No olvidemos que de los 40 clubes profesionales que hay hoy en día en la Liga de Fútbol Profesional, tenemos 11 con capital extranjero, ¿no? Con la última incorporación de City a través del Girona. Y nosotros, más que soñar, trabajamos para crearles ese clima y que puedan venir con tranquilidad a trabajar aquí. ¿Qué hacemos? Pues explicarles, es la parte más sencilla, la de la Liga, explicarles concretamente lo que estamos haciendo, explicarles que tenemos una visión a largo plazo, se lo explicamos, y le decimos concretamente qué hacemos. Les decimos cómo luchamos contra la violencia en los estadios, qué inversiones hacemos para luchar contra esa violencia, se lo explicamos. Les explicamos cómo luchamos contra los amaños, porque nos daña a largo plazo. Les explicamos cómo luchamos contra la piratería. Les explicamos cuál es nuestra estrategia de crecimiento a nivel internacional. Tenemos en más de 50 países enviados delegados, 5 filiales, estamos cerca de los operadores, tanto los que tienen contrato con nosotros como con los que no lo tienen, estamos cerca de las federaciones, las ligas profesionales, creamos escuelas, mandamos entrenadores, y eso se lo explicamos. Les explicamos que somos proactivos, que luchamos para que el deporte en general mejore, y lo hacemos no solo aquí, en la Federación Española de Fútbol, lo hacemos en las ligas europeas, lo hacemos en la UEFA, porque queremos hacer crecer al deporte y al fútbol en particular. Y hago un pequeño inciso para coincidir con el representante del City. Nosotros le damos la enhorabuena por la inversión que hace en el fútbol femenino. Todo el mundo sabe que es un sector que lo teníamos abandonado, y nosotros también estamos invirtiendo en el fútbol femenino. Tenemos mucho rango de mejora ahí y mucho rango de crecimiento. Y como decía, eso es lo que les explicamos a los inversores, y nuestro sueño era hace 4 años que nos creyeran, ahora es más sencillo, sencillamente les mostramos lo que estamos haciendo con datos, ¿no?
Don, just as you don't have your translator on, Javier was welcoming your group and really wishing you all the best in something that they really see as something fabulous for the Liga in general.
Great, thank you.
Gentlemen, I think that I see the Masters tournament is trying to look at me, so I think we still have 5 minutes. We spoke about women. Could be an interesting approach, but we could talk about it for the rest of the day, or our lives. If you had to go one way, if you had to choose one investment, one within sports, and we're at the football summit, so to each one of you, where would you go? Leagues, countries?
Starting with me?
Well, I start with whoever.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously need to be, this is a slightly naughty question. I obviously need to be slightly careful about how much detail I go into here. What I would say is that absolutely for us, when we're thinking about where we're going to go next, we think about which markets will continue to grow from a revenue perspective in the way that we would like them to, where there's synergy in terms of network benefit across the rest of our portfolio of clubs, and where the institutions and structures that are in place locally are aligned with what we'd like to do. So that's quite a long-winded way of not answering the specifics of your question.
It means I want to go to China and India, but the local institutions are difficult to cope with, so I'm not trying to go there.
Look, I mean, it isn't a simple question of, you know, here's a magic pill, you should absolutely go here first. The traditional markets like the Premier League, like Major League Soccer, like LaLiga, which have been really popular with investors, I think continue to be super interesting, and I think that they will be on a go-forwards basis. We're obviously already in all of those different markets, and as you look outside of that, there are a range of other factors which also need to be taken into consideration. The one thing that I would say at City Football Group is, you know, we have lots of different kinds of opportunity to invest in lots of different kinds of club or business within football. And what we've learned, I think, is that it's really important to be patient, to find the right kind of opportunity with the right kind of structures at the right price, right? And to think not only about that individual asset on its own, but for us also how that feeds into the rest of the jigsaw of the rest of our investment. So, you know, we are in this unique position of having a fantastic portfolio and a fantastic network today. We will continue to work to make sure that we consolidate that in the best way that we possibly can. But as I said 10 minutes ago, we're super excited about football. And so our investment absolutely will continue in this space, but we'll do it in a responsible, financially sustainable fashion.
I would love to see you buying out from Elliott AC Milan shares. Complicated after for the champion of the European League, but what about you?
You know, it's very interesting. You look at, we view markets, you know, everything has to be the right price. So we're not doing, you have to stick to your tenants, your cost of money, what is the proper return for the risk that you're taking. The US major sports markets are becoming very commoditized. They can use our advice, but not necessarily our money. We're doing a lot of work in Major League Soccer with MLS right now. So if you look at, there's tremendous, because of this undeveloped of the market, of the financing markets that we've talked about, the major Western markets, England, France, Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, Germany, are really still a green field for us, you know, because we believe getting the major clubs under strong underpinning financials will lead to down in those leagues, and that'll lead to, you know, Eastern Europe and then ultimately to Japan and China. I think it's partly is a logistics issue of where our expertise lies. But again, we view Europe as a greenfield, and we're looking to grow our balance sheet to $2 billion on balance sheet investment, not stuff we distribute as well. And again, you're getting into the buying and the selling of clubs. Goldman Sachs buys and sells more companies than anyone else in the world. You'll start to see that evolution, understanding the cash flow. What is the right value? What are the tangible and the intangible assets, and where are they going? So understanding where the TV deals are going. Understand is everyone's chasing the Asian dollar, but also we're facing things in the US where ESPN, people are cutting their cable cords because cable is getting too expensive. What's that alternative delivery stuff that Dan probably lives with on a day-to-day basis? These are all things we consider, but Europe is going to develop, infrastructure is going to get developed. These are institutions that have multiple of millions and millions of fans that only can grow if they're managed properly.
Jason, your view?
Yeah, obviously I concur with a lot of what Greg says. I think the good news is this is more a question for Don and for Javier, because the money shouldn't lead that answer, and the equity holders who will see that opportunity, and the entrepreneurs and the investors will spot the money. The finance should be just a tool, as alluded to, no different to many other companies and many other sectors which are a lot more boring, but the value of that finance is equally impressive. I think to Greg's point, what's very exciting for stakeholders in football is, that hopefully through the work of Greg, ourselves and others, there's a real drive to make sense of this investment, a real drive to make sense of intangible assets and cash flows and risk profiles and the uncorrelated, diversified nature of that within community institutions globally in a world where low interest rates and cash chasing yield is exciting for stakeholders to have access to that growing confidence and be able to access, again, monies that everybody else has been able to do in other sectors. And so just getting that right is exciting. And I think to Javier's point, the basics, investment into, whether that's fixing balance sheets, being able to stand up and say, yes, we had problems before, and those problems live in the minds of many of those institutions. Well, let's tackle that head on. Here are the tangible steps being taken. Here are the regulatory frameworks being put in place. All those 101s that obviously give investors confidence. And everywhere is different, as Don's alluded to, everywhere is different.
So this rotation, this cycle you were talking about before, it looks like we're really in the right business for the next...
I think we are. I urge caution that, again, we are in a low interest rate yield. It is very easy for institutional groups who have a lot of money to say, I get 1 year broadcast risk. Look at the Premier League, look at LaLiga. I get it, let's do that. I refer to that as kind of brain dead credit. And you see quite a lot of those proliferation of financiers running in to try and fund, whether that's the going concern or investment based off those same credit fundamentals. And if there were issues, yields were to increase, not that anybody, particularly Greg, will have better insight than most as to where they think those might lead. But if those were to increase or there were to be some credit challenges, and there will be, how sustainable is this offering? Well, it's as sustainable as the structuring, as the expertise, as the confidence that has been built with the market. And so, it's important to do that as opposed to jump and finance and grab an opportunity which may or may not be in the best interests of that franchise or stakeholder or going concern.
Well, I kept my time. You were extremely disciplined. I don't know how it works now. Where's our master of ceremony? I don't know how the round table ends, if we just say bye-bye and goodbye and we leave, or if it's open to questions. Hello? Well, we might grab 1 or 2 questions in the room. Somebody wants to ask some questions? Is there any microphones going around? No? Everybody's very silent. Questions? Scream out. I don't see anything, so...
Yeah, I can't see anything.
I can see 4 bright lights.
Do you see something? No.
There we go.
Yeah,
There's some
There you
hands.
go.
Ah, there you go. Please, go ahead. Yeah, you have to scream.
Question for Mr. Gregory. As you mentioned, ticketing counts for 50% of clubs' revenue. And what is the connection or role of stadium hospitality for corporate clients?
you know, and again, it varies differently, and every stadium is different in the marketplace. For example, you would expect the Yankees to have all these corporate clients, but baseball's 81 home games. It's a lot, so it's a lot of very small 4 tickets that they own a suite. And one of the biggest issues that's happening in the Major League Baseball is it's too many games, and you have things like Ticketmaster or StubHub that you can go buy and sell. So the New York Yankees have gone from 37,000 full season equivalent tickets to 23,000. So the game is changing because people can sell their tickets now. So it's not just some of the American football's very much corporate based, big suites, spend a lot of money, but other sports are actually just the mom and pops wanting to follow the club. So it's not all the big suites, just not all corporate. You know, it varies from, you know, the New York Giants, the American football, or the San Francisco 49ers, it's 50% corporate, 50% mom and pops. The Yankees is probably 20%.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. And thank you to the organizers for this wonderful event. And thank you to you, audience.
Thank you.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. Pablo, Don, muchas gracias. A mí me gustaría hacer 2 preguntas más antes de despedir la mesa. Una para Don.
He wants 2 questions more. We were calling him before he left as well.
Okay. Una pregunta para Don. Hemos escuchado y nos has explicado perfectamente la composición del City Group, los equipos en los que invierte, hasta 6 equipos en distintas ligas, en distintos continentes. ¿Qué sucede cuando se produce? ¿No se pueden producir transferencias de esos jugadores que podéis tener dentro de Citigroup en distintos equipos? Es decir, ¿eso puede generar alguna controversia? ¿Puede generar algún tipo de polémica, por ejemplo, en competiciones como la Liga o la Premier? ¿Se hace a lo que se entendería como precio de mercado? Yo creo que eso puede ser un foco quizás de controversia si no existe una regulación clara por vuestra parte sobre ello.
So, actually, it can also provide us with opportunities. So there's a great example of a player that we signed in Australia called Aaron Moy, who went to play for Melbourne City Football Club. He was then signed by Manchester City Football Club, who were made aware of this player because of our relationship through Melbourne. He went on loan to Huddersfield and is subsequently a player who public sources say we sold for £10 million this season. So actually, there's a great deal of synergy and opportunity for us that results from having more scouts in more places, more teams, looking at more players.
¿Y tu opinión, Javier, desde el punto de vista de una persona que trabaja en la Liga ante este tipo de situaciones? Es decir, ante grupos que puedan llegar a tener equipos en distintas competiciones, ¿eso debería tener algún tipo de vigilancia, debería tener algún tipo de regulación?
Sí, lo debería tener y lo tiene. Nosotros en la norma de control económico a la que me he referido anteriormente, hay un capítulo que se destina a lo que son las valoraciones de mercado de las transacciones entre grupos que puedan estar vinculados. Es decir, si hay transacciones que, de acuerdo con el mercado, y además hecho objetivamente, no se realizan al precio que se establece objetivamente de mercado, hay un ajuste por parte de la Liga de Fútbol Profesional en el que esos precios se ajustan de tal manera que, aunque no hayan transacciones monetarias entre los clubes, a efectos económicos y de equiparación con el resto de clubes, se haga ese ajuste para que sigan compitiendo de manera igualitaria todos los clubes.
Muy bien, pues si alguna conclusión ha quedado de esta mesa es que existe confianza en el sector, es decir, Javier mismo ha mencionado que hace 4 años la situación del fútbol español, con una deuda astronómica, con críticas, era muy diferente, el sector está mucho mejor, está regulado, hay confianza. Hemos escuchado a Jason, en nombre de la banca, hablar de que ahora existe una confianza y existe intención y cada vez más gente quiere invertir en el fútbol, y hemos escuchado la conclusión también de nuestro compañero de que estamos en el negocio adecuado. Con lo cual, muchas gracias y nos emplazamos para la siguiente mesa dentro de 10 minutos.